Okay, well, we are doing animals, and we've moved from invertebrates to vertebrates, from chordates to, the vertebrate animals, ones with endoskeletons and backbones, and that means us. And the closer you get to us in one respect, the closer you get to us in all respects, because all life is related. And so the closer you get to us in the family tree, the more resemblance there is. Which means that by the time we're getting to the inner anatomy of animals in this group, we're basically talking about our own anatomy. And so to learn about the insides of like amphibians and reptiles and birds, we might as well just talk about the insides of us. And then just imagine it's you, but in a different shape. I mean, it's kind of it. So there's this basic level of organization that all creatures have. And it goes like this. Now, as always, I'm treating this piece of paper like it's my whiteboard. So anything that I write here is noteworthy. This is being recorded. So if you're not set up to take notes right now, I wouldn't freak out about it because, the computer is taking notes, so to speak. But that's the format I'm going to keep. So obviously, everything's made of atoms. So duh. And then bunches of atoms together make molecules. Okay, duh. This isn't alive, though. This is just stuff from physics and physical science. It's not until you actually cross this line that you become alive. And once you cross this line, you would be made of cells. So if atoms are the basic unit of matter, then cells are the basic unit of life. And if you've got cells, all right, you're alive, but we're trying to make animals here, and animals are more complex than just cells. There are specialized kinds of cells. And let me make sure that there's not, yep, there we go. When we're talking about cells, you could have specialized versions of cells, and if you have a whole bunch of cells working together in one structure, we call that a tissue. So let me give you a good example of something like this, working from the bottom. So for an atom, you might have a nitrogen atom. If you were to take a nitrogen atom and maybe some hydrogen atoms, combine them together, you might get a molecule like this. That's ammonia. Okay, so ammonia, turns out, is part of is a necessary ingredient for building proteins. Now, proteins are just molecules. If you want to build a cell, most cells, or I should say all cells, have proteins in their structures. For example, there's a bunch of proteins that are part of the DNA synthesis mechanism, all right? So proteins are obviously going to be built into cells. And if you think of protein and you think of parts of your body, probably the first thing that you think of is muscle. So when you think of muscle, you could think of a muscle, or you could think of some muscle, as in just take a muscle, like, this one in your arm. You could take the whole thing, or you could just, snip a little bit out. Ow, by the way, don't snip a little bit of your arm off. But you could just take a little bit out, and you would not have an entire muscle. You would just have a piece of muscle. You'd have a whole bunch of cells in one big structure, so that would be called a tissue, a muscle tissue. If you've got a whole bunch of tissue in one big structure, that is what you call an organ. So, technically speaking, you could consider this muscle an organ. Now, hopefully you have more than one muscle in your body, not just this one on this arm. You're covered in them, which means you have a whole bunch of different organs all working together for your good. And that gives us our last level of organization, and that would be an organ system. So this being our level of organization, if we're going to learn about organs, basically we're going to start from here and then work our way down. We really only need to get to this level though, because learning about individual tissues is really more of a high school and college thing. We're going to stick with organs. So let me make a list of the organ systems that I hope to get to today. Obviously got to stick to 50 minutes. So let's see what I can do. So one obvious organ system that we're going to want to get to is the digestive system. Hopefully all of you ate lunch. So this will be actually kind of relevant because your digestive system is working right now. After your digestive system, we'd have your circulatory system. Hopefully that is also working right now because, you know, alive. We've got your respiratory system. That I and that R kind of got melded together into a backwards M. That's supposed to be respiratory, IR. See, I even have bad handwriting at home. It's cool. Past that, a couple that are smaller, which I might get to, but like I said, they're smaller, and I want to make sure that we spend our time on the good stuff. We got endocrine, immune, lymphatic, but the other big one that I'd like to do today is the muscular system. So if it's been like 10 minutes so far, I could spend 10 minutes on each of them, and that would be time. Let's see how that goes. My time management is famously bad. Remember that countdown clock I used to have at the front of the classroom just to make sure I didn't go over. However, this is just our outline for today. So let me erase the board and we can get on to one. So let's do the digestive system first. I think that's what most people think of when they think of organ systems, because when you think guts, you're usually thinking digestive ones. So animals, and this is like actually part of the definition of what it means to be an animal, is that you would have what's called a through digestive tract. And having a through digestive tract basically means that your body is donut shaped. It means that if you were made of clay and we could stretch you out, then the hole that runs through your body from mouth to you know where stuff comes out would be a hole, and your body would be a ring around it. Obviously, we're not that weird shape, but you could conceivably just put a string through your whole body, and this is just gross and gross the more I talk about it. So you get the idea. There's a hole that goes through you all the way through. Okay, so let's sketch this out. Very anatomically incorrect. I'm going to be making this easy to read, not realistic, okay? So we're going to take this from the point of view of food that you ate. I had a sandwich for lunch, so I might say sandwich, but whatever you had for lunch, it's going through. So the first place that your food's going to end up going into is, of course, a mouth. Mouth is a door. So this, that right there, that's your mouth. The inside, that's not actually your mouth. The mouth is just the door. The lobby in there, that's called your pharynx. So the place where your teeth are, the place where your tongue is, those are all inside of your pharynx. You have to go through your mouth to get there. So you can think of a pharynx as, like I said, the little lobby, whereas your mouth is the door. Now, this is actually where we run into our first other system, which we will get to, but your pharynx has to have two openings. One of them is where you breathe. We're not going that way. That goes down your trachea and your larynx. We are going the other way. So that means past your pharynx, after you swallow something, there's got to be some way for the food to go down here. Now, not in the front. This is where you breathe. In fact, like on me, you can even see it. It's this thing sticking out of my throat. That's part of what I breathe through. It's behind that, somewhere back here, where the tube is that the food goes down. And maybe you know the name of this. It's the esophagus. You don't want to mix these up because if food goes down this way, it might block it and then you'll choke. If air goes down that way, well, it's just uncomfortable and then you burp. Okay, where does your esophagus lead to? By the way, you can tell how completely anatomically incorrect this is, right? This doesn't look human at all. Right, so after your esophagus, you're going to have your stomach. And that's where all the food that you ate today still is. Inside of your stomach, there is a very, very corrosive acid. It's called hydrochloric acid. Here's your chemical formula, HCl. And its job is to dissolve food. This is actually the third step in your digestion. First, it gets crushed up here, then it gets moistened by your saliva, and then it starts getting dissolved. So I'm going to just pose a question. I'm going to see if anybody has ever thought of this. You can answer in the chat or just turn on your mic and call it out. So your stomach is full of acid. How come your stomach doesn't digest itself?
It has a protective layer of mucus.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we tend to think of mucus as the stuff in your nose, and while of course that's true, think about what it's there for, okay? On the inside of your nose, it's very, very sensitive skin. Just think about how sensitive it is. It's completely sheltered. It's inside your body. And it's one of the reasons why you kids in your internet games, people who snort cinnamon and that stuff is terrible for you because that skin is so sensitive. I almost hate to even mention that because if one of you never even heard of that, then you're like, ooh, that's a good idea. No, it's not. It's a bad idea. It's as dumb as pouring salt in your eye. So, oh no, I said another one. Don't hurt yourself is the point. But the point of mucus is to protect sensitive skin against things that can harm it. Now, in the case of your nose, it's mostly just to protect it against being dry, but it also catches bacteria. In your stomach, though, that mucus is a layer of protection between the inside of your stomach and then the acid. Now, there are little muscular doors at the top and at the bottom of your stomach. They're called sphincters. And they are important because if you didn't have that, whenever you did a handstand, your stomach would just dump everything out your mouth. So you got to have a door there. There's a door at the top. There's a door at the bottom. And after the stomach, then, I think everybody knows where this goes. It goes to the small intestine. Which maybe I should have written to fit inside the small intestine, but hindsight and all that. So the small intestine like winds back and forth, and it's basically all coiled up inside of your body. Now, in terms of where all this is something that I would invite you to try and feel out on yourself. It's really hard to learn about your body without it being a little awkward. So, you just got to deal. But mouth, pharynx, then your esophagus goes down, and your stomach ends up being like kind of like right around there. And your small intestine is going to be, I look like I'm like looking at some delicious cake or something. Anyway, that's where your small intestine is going to be. It's going to be all wound up in there. And it's very long. It's like 20 something feet long or something. It's all coiled in there. And the small intestine is where, after the food has been beaten into submission by your teeth and then dissolved to goop by your stomach, that's where finally your body's able to retrieve all the nutrients out of it. Once we're done with the small intestine, it takes a pass through what's called the large intestine. I'm going to start going that way for room's sake. Obviously, it's not the real shape. So it goes through the large intestine, which I kind of like to think of as like the off-ramp of the intestine highway. It's shorter and longer. And we're almost to the end. There is something after the large intestine that you also have on your keyboard, and that is a colon. Okay, so what is the job of the colon? If the small intestine's job is to get nutrients out of food that you're digesting, by the time we get to the large intestine, we're basically done. As in, the body is not going to make any more use out of this food. So it was moistened with saliva up here, and then it was dissolved in acid here, which means everything in here is goop. By the time it gets here, it's still goop, which means there's a lot of water in it. And if you were to just get rid of everything at this point, you'd be wasting a lot of water. So actually, the job of the colon is to retrieve water, to get water out of the digested food before it's finally expelled. And, this just ends up in the bathroom, because the other end, that's the anus, and that's where number 2 comes out. So this is your entire digestive tract, starting with food in, all the way to food out. What comes out here is, think of it like leftovers. It's not waste so much as it's leftovers. Like when you're done eating lunch in the lunchroom, when we used to have lunch in the lunchroom, everything you scrape off the plate into the trash can, that's all this. It's not actually waste in the sense that like exhaust is the waste of a car. This is more like the, I guess it's more efficient than to have leftover gasoline. Anyway, I want to move on to the next system, unless someone has a question about the digestive system.
Is the test tube in notes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The options for teaching remotely are either make it impossible to cheat or just make it open note. That's those are the options. And I think we get used to learning a certain way and having each other as a resource, and when all of a sudden that's gone, we want to adjust what you're expected to do to what I'm able to give you. So yeah, that's a good question. All right, anything about the digestive system before we move on? All right, I guess that's a no. I think I might be doing okay with time, but the next system after this was the circulatory system. Okay, so the circulatory system has something kind of in common with this. And I think I'm going to save that for the respiratory system. Actually, no, I have to do it for the circulatory system. Okay. Stop. We're going to do the circulatory system. So one of the things that we learn when we're doing fish, and then amphibians, and then reptiles, and then birds and mammals, is differences with the heart. So the hearts of the hearts of invertebrates, I hardly want to call them hearts. It's almost more like a blood vessel with a muscle on it, right? It's when we finally get to vertebrates that we actually have a heart that we consider a heart. And part of what is significant about that is the chambers. So we're going to get to 3 chambers tomorrow. And we'll tell you what, I'll just start illustrating it. So the whole point of a heart is, of course, I gotta make this anatomically incorrect. So what a heart needs to be able to do is take blood in and put blood out. So let's say we've got an in hole here. Okay, any chamber in a heart that receives blood is called an atrium. Okay, so let's say the body has used blood. The heart collects it into an atrium. What will it do then? Well, depending on what creature we're talking about, it'll do one of 2 things. It will either send it to the lungs to get more oxygen, or it will send it back out to the body. Let's go ahead and send it to the lungs. So here's what is going to happen here. The atrium is going to send this blood to a chamber that sends blood out. Any chamber that sends blood out is called a ventricle. So blood comes into an atrium and then goes out to a ventricle. I'm going to go ahead with the human heart with 4 chambers, and the differences between it and the amphibian and reptile lungs, heart, that should be covered in tomorrow's lesson. So if we're going to be sending blood out from our heart, we need to send it to the lungs to get more oxygen. And I will describe that process in a bit more detail when we do the circulatory system. So blood ends up going to the lungs, at which point it gets oxygen. The heart has to take it back. And you remember that whatever takes blood in a heart is called an atrium. The atrium is going to send it to a ventricle. And that is going to send that out to your body. Whew. So if a heart has less chambers than this, what is it doing? Well, it would just have 1 ventricle instead of 2. In other words, it simultaneously sends blood to the lungs and to the body. When you have 4 chambers, you'll notice I colored 2 of them blue and 2 of them red. Anything that is blue is after the body was done with it. See, it came in from the body to this atrium, then out to the lungs. But it's red after it's been to the lungs. After it's been to the lungs, back to the heart, back out to the body, and it's out of the body. Now it's purple because its oxygen is going away. And that's the idea. The whole point of having chambers in your heart is to keep the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood separate. If you don't have two ventricles, but you only have one, it's just slightly mixed. And the only reason that we need to keep our oxygenated blood separate is because your brain uses a lot of oxygen. And it can't afford to have semi-oxygenated blood. That's really the whole deal. So your circulatory system is going to work on a similar principle to the other principle that I was saving for the respiratory. So let me just write two more things and then I'll go ahead and do respiratory. Anything that brings blood into the heart is called a vein. And it doesn't matter whether it's oxygenated or not. If it's going into the heart, it's called a vein. Anything that goes out of the heart is called an artery. And it doesn't matter whether it's oxygenated or not. If it's headed out of your heart, it's called an artery. Now, just so you know, the largest arteries and veins actually have names. And I can go ahead and just write those names down for those of you who are curious. For example, the one big artery that comes out of your heart is called your aorta. It is your largest blood vessel. And just for scale, this is like one of those facts that's usually written in kids' books. The aorta of a blue whale is so big that a little kid can crawl through it. It's enormous. So that's the big artery that comes out of your heart, but then it splits into a couple different paths. There is one in particular that is very important, and that's because it feeds your brain. It heads up your neck. It's called the carotid artery. Now, maybe you haven't heard of that one, but I bet you have heard of this one. That would be the vein that comes back down your head through your neck, and that is called your jugular vein. You've often heard maybe go for the jugular, basically meaning show no mercy, go get them. It's because having your jugular vein severed is basically a death sentence because you just lose too much blood. I mean, sorry, but I mean, we're talking about the circulatory system. You can't really avoid that. Okay, well, lots of them have names depending on how thin your skin is. If you're like me, you can even like see them in your wrist or on the back of your hand, but you know, we don't need to be too gross about it. We're gonna do the respiratory system, and then hopefully I should be able to get the muscular system in before we run out of time, because the respiratory system, I think, is the best demonstration of this principle they all share. So, let's see, are you guys in, some of you are in like pre-algebra, some of you are in algebra, but y'all know like the difference between surface area and perimeter, right?
Yeah.
All right, so get a little geometry puzzle here. I've got two rectangles with the same area. This is a 4 by 4, so this rectangle is a square. Then another rectangle is 2 by 8. First of all, let's just make sure, do they both have the same area? Area is length times width, so that would be 4 times 4. This would be 2 times 8. Those are the same answer, right? They're both 16? Okay, so these two have the same area. Do they have the same perimeter?
No.
No, they don't. See, the perimeter for this one is going to be 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4. And the perimeter for this one is going to be 2 plus 8 plus 2 plus 8. So this one is 16, but this one is 20. So this is a geometrical principle that actually makes life possible. Like, you think I'm joking. I'm not joking. So there is a reason that cells are almost always round, more shaped like this than like that. If you are a cell and you have to be built out of materials, that means that using more materials is more expensive, and stronger shapes are more likely to give you survival. One of these shapes is obviously stronger than the other, and if you don't know which one, try making a block this shape out of Legos and a block this shape out of Legos, drop it and see which one is more likely to break. This one is indestructible compared to that. This is a stronger shape. Also, it has a smaller distance around. Now, this is two-dimensional, but if you scale it up to 3 dimensions, it just means that a round ball shape has less surface than this, which has a lot of surface. So cells will tend to be this shape. Their cell membrane can be stronger, and they have to use less resources. Okay, less surface area means more efficient construction. But this has more surface area, and that has its own advantage. So just keep this little nugget in your mind for a second. Back when we were doing the digestive system, we passed the path where the air goes down. I want to take you down that path real quick. So I'm going to use this room over here. So we're looking at, like, you know, same like you're looking at me. It's straight on. So this would be the top of the tube where your air goes down. At the top of this is called your larynx. Now, this is something that you can actually feel. So I'm gonna get rid of my tie here for a second. So if you, again, I have to keep telling you not to hurt yourself. If you just want to feel around your throat, you should be able to feel right here in the front some kind of bump. Now, mine happens to be big because, you know, I'm a grown man. So this is larger. This is where your voice is produced. So this is why men tend to have larger ones, because you know, testosterone makes it bigger, so your voices go deeper. But no matter what, you should be able to find yours, and this is going to be your larynx. It's supported by cartilage, which is why it feels, you know, like a bump. But that goes down to here, at which point it's called your trachea. You may have heard of a trachea, maybe not by its name, but maybe you've heard of a tracheotomy. That is a life-saving procedure that you can give to someone. If there's food stuck in their larynx, you can actually just poke a hole in their trachea, and they can breathe through that. The air doesn't need to go through your mouth. It just needs to get to your lungs. So you can actually perform what's called a tracheotomy and just take a shortcut to your lungs through the bottom of your throat. It makes me cringe just thinking about it, but it is possible. Now, below your trachea, that is where it starts to get messy, because you've got 2 lungs, which means that it splits. And these are called your bronchi. Okay, I'm going to follow this one. Just remember, though, you've got 2 halves. You have bilateral symmetry, which means everything that I do over here also happens over there. Okay, so if you've ever drawn a tree, you might recognize what's going on when I do this. Here goes. So the bronchi splits, and then that splits, and then that splits, and then those split. And then Those split. I could do this for days and I still wouldn't have the entire thing. So I didn't count them, but does anybody want to take a shot at how many lines we have at the end? It's going to be 1 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. If I had to guess, I'd say it's 32, which is funny because that's how old I am today. Every time
it's
range,
32.
we're doubling. Now, whether it's just doubling or tripling, you know, but that math doesn't matter. What really matters is that we're starting with something big and blocky, and we're ending with a whole bunch of things that are long and thin. Look familiar? Okay, so the idea is this has a lot of volume. This can hold a lot of air. But if you want to split this up into a million tiny pieces, then each one of those has a lot of surface area. And that means more surface area means more diffusion. Okay, so think about it like this. Let's say you've got a balloon that's leaking air. And I don't mean out through a hole, I just mean like through the skin of the balloon. Which one would leak faster? A small balloon or a large balloon? See, the difference is that the small balloon only has a small area in which to lose air. The large balloon has way more places for air to escape. So more surface area in your lungs means the air is able to come into contact with way more of your body. And at the end of your bronchi are little tiny structures called bronchioles. And they have little tiny blood vessels wrapped around them. Blood vessels from your circulatory system. So the idea is your circulatory system does this too. You got a big artery that splits into little arteries, that splits into little arteries, that splits into little arteries. By the time you get down here, they're not even called arteries anymore. They're called capillaries. And if you've got little tiny blood vessels right next to little tiny air pockets, you have a lot of air in contact with a lot of blood. That's how oxygen gets into your blood. And I also said that it mattered with respect to your digestive system. You have structures like that in your small intestines, a lot of surface area so that there is a lot of surface area for your food to touch your intestines so that your intestines can absorb it. So depending on the purpose of whatever, thing your body is made of, having a small amount of surface area or having a large amount of surface area is to your advantage. Okay, so I think this goes from 235 to 225, doesn't it? So that means we still have about 8 minutes to do some muscles. Oh, this is great. Okay. So this is going to be a little bit like the bones, in which you really can't help but you just kind of have to get up. I don't need to see you. You can keep your camera off, but I am going to have to stop sharing and make this be big. So I might need to actually back up just a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you as many muscles as I possibly can for the next 7 minutes, and okay, maybe make it 5 so you guys can ask some questions at the end. But see, you could just let me know in the chat, because this is actually something I don't know. How many of you were either on the soccer team or, see, do you have middle school basketball too? So yeah, if you were on a sports team, why don't you, I don't know, just give yourself a high five in the chat or something. Learning about muscles and muscle groups is something that, you know, you can do in like health class, but it's also something that you can do when you're playing sports. So let me see if I can stand up. Okay. So let's see how athletic I can be in this very restrictive shirt, but we'll see. So the muscles all have these Latin names that are based on either where they are or how they're built. And I'm going to start with, you know, everybody's favorite muscle. That's the bicep. So bicep, the name bicep means two heads. Bi, you know, like bicycle means two, and then sep is part of the same. What is it? The same root as like encephalitis or encephalogram. Ceph means head, so bicep means two heads. The reason it's called two heads is because your bicep, which is this muscle right here, is connected at two places. So if we were in class, it would be really easy for me to say, hey, what's this bone called? But you know, the reaction time would be too long. So if you care to, name this bone in your arm. It's the one that sounds like a word for funny. But this bone right here is connected to this muscle in two places, so it's called biceps. All right, that muscle is the humerus. Now you do have another muscle actually here, also connected to your humerus, and it is connected in three places. So if you take bicep but replace the two with three, you get tricep. That would be this muscle right here. Okay, so two muscles on the top of your arm, bicep, tricep. Here's how they work, okay? So actually, I kind of can't resist showing this to you. I got this mic stand thing here, and it's got springs on it, right? And that's how it's able to adjust. All right, let me put that back. That's kind of not a bad model for how your arm works. The idea is, if it's limp, your arm would be hanging down. If I want to lift this up, I need to constrict that. I know if I want to let it down, I relax it. You get the idea? And it's opposite. If I want to pick my arm up, I can't reach that. I need to constrict that muscle, and if I want to let it down, just relax it. So these two muscles, the biceps and the triceps, they just work opposite each other to move your arm back and forth. Okay, there is one more muscle on your arm that's actually very important. It's called your deltoid. Has anybody ever been down to Delta, down close to Maryland? It's a town that's like down 74, like pretty much all the way down to Maryland. Yeah, there you go. So delta is a geographical term even. Like if you're learning about rivers, you know that rivers have deltas. It's because they're shaped like a triangle. And the idea is that this muscle is kind of triangularly shaped. So deltoid, bicep, tricep, those three muscles are responsible for most of the motion in your arm. Okay, there's a couple more muscles that have seps in their name. So let me see if I can, yeah, I'm just gonna have to tilt this down and step back. Okay, so never realized how small this room is until I need to step back really far. So the next muscles that have seps in their name are actually your thigh muscles. They are called your quadriceps. Now, just like you had, you know, biceps and triceps on this long limb bone, remember, that's the femur. It's got triceps on the front. I'm sorry, quadriceps. I'm already mixing myself. Quadriceps on the front. And the muscle that's in the back of that is called your hamstring. Now, when it comes to like learning these muscles for exercise, usually it's in the context of a stretch. So I think actually if I just show you stretches for these four muscles, then that'll basically be time. If you wanted to stretch your triceps, you basically have to put your arm all the way up like that and pull back like that. You ever done this stretch? So if you do this, and by the way, like, you put your phone or your computer down, just kind of step away from it. Try the stretch where you stick your elbow straight up in the air, and then with your other hand, pull back on it. You should feel that stretch in here. That's your triceps. And if you hold that, for 10 or for 20, and then you put it down, that good feeling you get when you stretch. It's like, yeah, I feel healthy all of a sudden. I'm actually very unhealthy, but I feel healthy, and that kind of counts for something. All right, what about biceps? If you want to stretch a bicep, really all you can do is just extend this arm. And let's see, you're supposed to do that. I think you're supposed to like pull your arm back. I'm not actually sure how to stretch a bicep, but I know how to stretch a quadricep. This one was always lots of fun because there's always a risk that you fall down. That's one where you lift up your leg and then you grab it. And depending on how good your balance is, maybe hold on to something. But if you are able to like really lift that back, you can feel that in here. That's your quadricep stretching. Yes, and that's a good one too. Anyway, it's a shame because there are loads of other muscles, like the ones in your calf, one in your shin, ones in your ribs, but like, that's all kind of specific knowledge. But the whole point of learning all this stuff is, yeah, it's true about us, but like, frogs have these same muscles. Bears have these exact same muscles. Not all fish have them, but some of them do, or at least they have similar muscles. And it also helps because, like, in the one on fish, some of the names of the fins, like the shark had pectoral fins. These muscles, these are your pectoral muscles. Pectoral fins are just ones like on that part of your body. Anyway, I've talked all the way up to 225. So I have an assignment for you, and then I'll just hang on for a couple minutes in case someone wants to ask questions or whatever. So here's what I want you to do. This recording will be posted on the Life Science playlist of my YouTube channel, like almost immediately. If you missed, if you weren't taking notes, which is fine. But what I want you to do is, I want you to tell a story of, this is a fictional story, like tell the story of you eating something, and I want you to name as many organs in that as possible. So like here, let me just give you an idea of what I mean. You could just describe its path through the digestive system, but like think about it like if you go to get a cheeseburger, you lift it up with your biceps, right? And then you chew it and it gives you good feelings in your brain. I didn't even get to the nervous system. 50 minutes just isn't enough time. Anyway, I want you to just like describe eating something, name as many organs as you can. It's semi-creative writing, so no pressure on that. Anyway, I think that should do it. So if anybody has any questions or comments or just wants to chat for a couple minutes, I'll stay here. Otherwise, class is dismissed. Goodbye. Bye-bye.